Now joined also from Washington DC by Anand Mahindra of the Mahindra Group, who's joining us live. Good morning, Anand, and thank you very much for sharing your time this morning with us to be a part of our live coverage of the run-up to Narendra Modi's visit to Washington, and now his impending bilateral with the US President Barack Obama. Anand, he's the 9th Prime Minister to be holding bilaterals, but I don't think there has been so much attention that there has been on any Indian Prime Minister's meeting with Barack Obama. What do you think he can strike? What do you think he can strike for Indian business? What would you like to see in terms of concrete steps at the end of this particular bilateral, Anand?
Arnab, I have very measured expectations from this entire trip. Since you began with what you thought, or you asked me what I thought he could strike with President Obama, my impression is that at meetings like this, first-time meetings, it's not usually about a specific laundry list of items that you want to check off. It's very important for people of two large nations like this, leaders of two large nations like this, to hit it off, to strike some kind of chemistry. And that, if he achieves that, I think we would have achieved a tremendous goal in and of itself. He has to be comfortable from now on to be able to pick up the phone and call President Obama, converse with him, and there should be a comfort level between them. That's the minimum expectation I have. If they manage to get to a checklist of items, whether it relates to business or trade or the combat against terrorism, well and good. But I think we should all probably not try to exaggerate or magnify the expectations too much on this first visit.
You think there have been?
Well, certainly there is. I keep getting asked the questions about what do you want to achieve from business and trade, how much investment would you like to come out of this trip? And I think that certainly is misplaced. We were not looking at this trip for him to come back as he would off a vibrant Gujarat or a vibrant India kind of platform and say, I have gotten so many billions of dollars of investment. The question is, has he made an impact? Do people believe that there is finally somebody in charge who's a true conductor of the orchestra, who is going to make all the varied musical instruments of India, be it economic or business or political, are they going to all play in unison from now on? That is the impact people want to have, that India has leadership that can deliver on its commitments.
Right. So basically, you're saying that all these people who believe that this will be the big watershed moment are probably misplaced. But so Anand, at least on business, you've moderated expectations quite a bit. But who's generating the hype? Is it the government of India? Is it business leaders? Is it the investing community? Are there people who just want so-called sentiment to become okay so that investment flows? Someone's generating this hype. It's not the media. It's a very well-planned hype-building operation also which is going on. So my question to you is, who's generating the hype? Is it the business community?
This is one of those wonderful questions where the answer has to be all of the above. And who knows what the objectives are. But if we dispense with the cynicism for a while, Arnab, the fact is that there has been a leader finally who's been elected with a majority, a party that has been elected with a majority after 30 years in the world's in the world's largest democracy. 550 million people voted. You know, it's about time that got attention on the world stage. And I think he made that point very eloquently at the Council on Foreign Relations yesterday. Before he got into any nitty-gritty, he said, look, let's just understand what happened. And he said it's very difficult unless you're on the ground in India to understand the magnitude of an election and of somebody voting in a party and leadership into power after 30 years. So that itself should have caused much more hype than it did. And what I'm saying is that, frankly, by coming to New York, which I've always said has this quality of being the world stage, the world center stage. It's like center court at Wimbledon. Then coming here and announcing that and introducing himself to the world, introducing the election phenomenon that happened, well, I think that deserves hype, don't you?
I think we are getting pictures of Modi's arrival there and he's just entered the White House. Modi just drove in while he was speaking. Anand Mahindra, that's Narendra Modi. Will stay with the full-frame pictures. The 9th Indian Prime Minister to be holding bilateral meetings of the highest level with the White House. The first Indian Prime Minister who visited the United States was Jawaharlal Nehru in 1949. And just a small aside, while we see pictures of the Indian entourage, the Indian team go in for the conversation there inside White House, when Jawaharlal Nehru visited the White House in 1949, the agenda was the growth of economic ties and the exchange of technology and machinery between the two nations. Narendra Modi, interestingly, comes to Washington with broadly the same agenda at the core. But of course, the expectations are higher, the scale is higher. One Prime Minister who had the most visits was Manmohan Singh. He had 8 visits to the United States when he was in power. He almost came once every year. And this, therefore, is an interesting moment because it is for the first time, and those are pictures of Narendra Modi earlier today. The Indo-US relationship through history has gone through many ups and downs. And as we see pictures of Narendra Modi go into White House today, keep in mind, will the US want to build this relationship so that India is a counterweight to China? Will this therefore be the US looking at India in much the same way as it did during the John F. Kennedy presidency, for example, when the Kennedy administration backed India during '62 with China, saw it as a counterweight? Will Narendra Modi want to be seen as a counterweight? I can't really be sure of that. But India seeking its position on the global stage, how long is this meeting likely to last? Narendra Modi and Barack Obama have a 2-hour and 40-minute time slot, and after that there is a lunch. There is a lot in terms of Indo-US ties which is at stake here. There are defense deals, there are business ties, there is trade, there is investment, and of course there is a strategic relationship. What is Modi's wish list to Obama? Let me take you through what I think will be a few bullet points of what Modi's wish list to Obama will be. One, he will say that Pakistan and terror should be terror on Pakistani soil should be taken up very, very aggressively. I'm sure he'll pick up the issue of Hafiz Saeed. Will he break the deadlock on the nuclear deal? Will he raise the issue? Which side is going to raise the nuclear deal issue? I'll wait for that. Maybe both sides would like to spell out each other their Afghanistan and their ISIS strategy. He will look to push a commitment for investment in his Make for India initiative through FDI. This will be a significant contributor for Modi to fulfill his promise that he wants to take, the share of manufacturing in India's GDP up. Now that's a ceremonial band which is coming to you, those pictures from outside the White House. Let's see if we can get any audio, and I'll come back in 10 seconds. Is Navika outside the White House? If Navika is outside the White House, maybe I can get an update from her as well.
That's right, Arnab. Yes, Arnab, we saw 2 cars going in. One, of course, was the first car, a limousine, which went in with External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj. And then the second car with the 2 flags, the India flag and the American flag, carried Narendra Modi inside. So both of them have gone inside for the meeting about 5 minutes back. And this is the ceremonial band that was at the porch really to receive Prime Minister Narendra Modi, which has now come out and is standing before the White House. In fact, this entire welcome ceremony now underway, and Narendra Modi is inside closeted first for restricted talks, which will be one-on-one between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Barack Obama, and followed by the delegation level talks, where officials and the Foreign Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj will join the talks. So we are seeing this ceremonial band really coming out of White House after that welcome for ceremonial welcome for Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Okay, we'll stay with the pictures, Navika, and we'll keep getting updates from you. Strobe Talbot, President of the Brookings Institution, former Deputy Secretary of State, joining me this morning. Anand Mahindra is with us live. Mr. Talbot, good morning. And Anand Mahindra, thank you for staying on with us.
Good morning.
First to you, Mr. Strobe Talbot, you've been a key player. You've interacted with so many governments, and in your own time in government, you have been instrumental in taking those leaps of faith forward vis-a-vis India and building the bilateral relationship. How much should we expect out of this particular bilateral round, Mr. Talbot?
In a word, I would say more progress in the direction that you just accurately conveyed.
And in terms of specifics, you've been in government. Expectation in India very high, Mr. Talbot. Would that be a good thing to do, or should there be a moderation of expectations?
Well, I wouldn't say it's so much a matter of moderating expectations. It's being realistic about expectations. What you called a leap of faith was actually more a leap of pragmatism, a leap of recognition on how much the two countries have in common. And the big progress was made when we were able bilaterally and each country on its own to put the heavy onus of the past behind us and really open up a new chapter in the relationship. So that was the big breakthrough. And since then, it's been largely a matter of giving more substance to the relationship, taking what was a very important big step and then connecting that big step to lots of small steps or smaller steps that will increase the scope of the relationship. And I think that will be what we should all hope for and expect out of this particular meeting between the two leaders. We shouldn't expect a kind of a boffo surprise. We shouldn't expect one great big deal. We should, among other things, and I think we've already got some confidence that this will happen, that the two leaders will develop a personal relationship that will allow them to interact one-on-one over the phone, occasionally person to person, in dealing with some of the big issues that are facing both countries.
Mr. Talbot, while there is an understanding that India and America need to work together, it's not clear to many of our viewers what the pivot of that relationship will be. Will it be India as a counterweight to China, or will it be purely a broader and deeper economic relationship? And is there a link between the two, in your view? What will be the pivot of a stronger India-America relationship, Mr. Talbot?
Well, allow me to use a slightly different metaphor than a pivot, because a pivot suggests that we're changing course. I would see it as an even keel as we continue on the course that we have been on for the last 15 years. And that keel has at least three parts to it. And the earlier report that I had a chance to listen to before you came to me got two-thirds of it right, I would say. There is the economic relationship, which has already burgeoned to a significant degree, but has a lot further to go. U.S. trade with China is 5 times that of U.S. trade with India, and that's a gap that must be closed over time. And then there are political and indeed geopolitical issues where we have common grounds. I'm thinking particularly about the importance of stability in the Pacific Asia region, in what Indians called West Asia, what we call the Middle East, and of course there is the threat of terrorism that both countries have suffered from in the past. But then the third component of this steady, even keel that I hope will guide us as we go forward is shared values and shared institutions of pluralistic democracy.
Well, by the way, Mrs. Strobe Talbot, as you're speaking, also with us is one of India's most distinguished business leaders, Anand Mahindra of the Mahindra and Mahindra Group. And I find a common strain between what you say and what Anand Mahindra says in the sense that neither of you want the expectations to be too sky high at this point of time, and that you want to actually give it time for the relationship to first build and then to gradually move forward. Anand, I found that intriguing that both of you actually, because there has been so much of a build-up to the Narendra Modi trip to the USA that those who, there may be, this is not Madison Square Gardens, this is not an amphitheater. If anything, it's an amphitheater of global diplomacy where things move slowly. Interesting. Both on the diplomatic side from Strobe Talbot and from you on the business side, I get a message. We are hopeful that things will happen, but they may take a little time. How do you think people in India will view it? Sometimes people want shortcuts, quick fixes, Anand.
No, you're right. Of course, yes, I noticed too that Strobe and I had remarkably similar views. We did not collaborate on this before we came on camera. I found it intriguing too that he used the same
I believe you.
example of these two leaders being comfortable enough to speak on the phone afterwards. But I have to say that there is one, since metaphors are proliferating this morning, let me add one more. And the only thing I would differ slightly from Strobe is that he's saying he would look for even keel. Strobe would say that no, I am not particularly gratified by the relationship we've had for the past 15 years. I'm not enthused by it being an even keel. So if I change the metaphor, I think we need to move to a slightly higher orbit as far as the relationship is concerned. And given how much we've been talking about Mars and the orbiter, maybe that metaphor is, you'll forgive me for using that. But I do think people are looking for something to move to another orbit. And just the fact of Narendra Modi being welcomed here points to the fact that some afterburners have been fired, that the visa issue is behind us. In a wonderful way, Mr. Modi brought the whole visa issue full circle when he announced visas on arrival for the US. He had a wonderful sense of theater when he did that. And but so that has already taken us to a different orbit. We do want to see a chemistry between him and President Obama, as Strobe himself mentioned. We also do want to see some targets set. This is not a meeting in which, as I said, you want expectations of every item on the laundry list to be checked off. But Mr. Modi is setting targets. He is making promises, as he did in Madison Square Garden, to the diaspora. So, for example, when you come back to my area of expertise and you talk about trade, I would like a target to be set. There is a paper that's in Indian think tanks right now talking about taking the trade level to a level of 1 trillion from just the paltry 120 billion it is now by, let's say, the year 2022. I would like to see some targets being set so that there is something we can then begin to watch and monitor from now on.
Yeah. But what about, no, I believe that both of you distinguished gentlemen have not collaborated and that it is a completely coincidental meeting of minds between both of you. I believe you on that, Anand and Strobe. Please don't, You don't have to explain that to me, certainly not me. But I am a little bit more impatient than both of you gentlemen. And I actually want to pick on a few troublesome issues, Mr. Talbot, with your permission. You see, and by the way, for all our viewers, I couldn't have got two better names to discuss business and economy and then look at the bigger picture. Is the Indo-US nuclear thing behind us? Mr. Talbot, you know this better than others. Is it now behind us? Can we just leave it behind, first of all? Because things that are not going to happen should not be, time should not be wasted on it. Is it behind us?
I will answer that, but I also want to propose a compromise between myself and Mr. Mahindra and say that perhaps rather than seeing this as a rocket ships flying off into space, let's just say we both agree that we need a more robust wind in the sails of the relationship, because I certainly agree with you that acceleration over time is not only desirable, but I think it's absolutely something that we can achieve. No, I don't think we should leave the nuclear issue behind us. You're talking about the civilian nuclear deal. Yes, there have been obstacles that have arisen on both sides, as we know, but that does not mean that we should abandon that. It was an important implementing step in the overall improvement of the relationship. And civilian nuclear energy is going to be a factor, not a decisive factor, but an important factor in dealing with one of the great threats to a successful 21st century for the human enterprise, and that is dealing with carbon and with climate change. So, and if the United States and India cannot join in being part of the solution to that problem, then there is not going to be a solution to that problem. And nuclear is going to be part of that solution. So we should not give up on that.
Yes, certainly we shouldn't. Mr. Talbot, yes, Mr. Talbot, when Modi was in Japan, he took a jibe at China, speaking out against expansionist attempts in the South China Sea. He didn't take names, but of course that was what he meant. Now we know that the United States has taken a strong sense of, strong view of China's actions as well. Now Modi again at the UN General Assembly appeared to take a sort of an indirect jibe at China when he spoke about maritime security in the Asia Pacific. It's there in today's joint editorial in the Washington Post as well, where both of them talk about working towards maritime security. Do you see, with all of this, Mr. Talbot, do you see Narendra Modi leaning strategically towards America vis-a-vis China?
I'd put it a little bit differently. I think what you are noting is absolutely correct in terms of the Prime Minister's position. By the way, not just in Japan, but also in his meetings with President Xi Jinping. And it is a view that he shares with President Barack Obama. We are in a potentially dangerous period where the most populous country on the planet, China, is, as it were, kind of feeling its oats, as we say, and is pounding its chest a bit and making, asserting unilaterally what it regards as historically justified claims to both territory and maritime space that are disputed. There are ways to deal with such disputes, and it's through international law and international tribunals. The wrong way to deal with them is unilateral action. India and its Prime Minister have raised, let's say, a big red flag on that issue, and so has the President of the United States. And I think it's important that in the Washington Post piece that was just released a couple of hours ago, they came together on that. That does not, however, suggest that India and the United States are going to form some kind of strategic alliance against China. That was an idea that was floated back in 2000. Neither the United States nor many of us in the United States, and I think a lot of people in India, were attracted to that idea. What is really important is that the Chinese government and the Indian government work on a bilateral basis to diminish their own issues of contentions, one of which, of course, is a border issue that came up when Prime Minister Modi was in Beijing. And that should be negotiated and dealt with purely through diplomatic means. And that is a principle that President Obama believes in with regard to the Far East. It's an issue. It's a position that he takes with regard to what's happening in Ukraine right now, where military solutions have trumped diplomatic solutions. And I think that is one very important global principle that the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of India will agree on and will help to promote elsewhere in the world.
Well, yes, I think mature nations can have, relationships with each other independent of each other, Mr. Talbot. I think you make a very significant point there in your intervention. Now, Anand, you're in Washington, and I'm sure, you run a large organization which has also interests in all areas, including defense. What kind of technology transfer do you see happening? A. B. How can Indian companies work towards indigenizing our defense production and technology abilities, so that as India becomes a more significant global player on the world stage, over a period of time, we don't just spend billions of dollars outsourcing our technology needs, but can also turn it into a quality homegrown model. Do you see this particular visit and whatever conversations happen today, possibly, Anand, setting the stage for that?
I'm not sure, Arnab, that this visit is going to achieve anything in terms of attacking the major problem, or the major irritant to getting a very robust domestic capability for defense. And let me explain what I mean. We've been laboring away for the last decade at trying to become a major source of indigenous supply to the defense establishment. And the missing link is not FDI in defense. It is not whether or not there's willingness on the part of America to come in and provide the equipment and know-how to the market. After all, India is one of the largest importers in the world. All American organizations that supply defense equipment will want to be there and have expressed an interest in being there. The missing link is that what you need is a very predictable, sustained and transparent mode of procurement by the armed forces. That has been the missing link. So we are looking to the wrong two people. It's not
That's
Indian
right.
business, it's not America that has to be talked to about this. It is about our armed forces coming out with a very clear agenda, saying this is what we need, giving us the details of what they need, giving us a predictable time schedule, because these are very large investments. They require commitment and technology to be applied to it. And then, frankly, once they tell us this is their this is what they need, this is by when they need it, and this is the transparent process of procurement, well, then fine, I promise you, Indian companies and American or whichever other companies want to come in here will step up to bat. So we are looking in the wrong direction to get defense procurement off the ground in India.
Yeah, but I feel there is a certain change of mood, Anand. And while we cannot expect this particular visit to make all that, every aspect, change the whole dynamic overnight, I think people are looking at it keenly because we have some of our own concerns. America has some of its own concerns. What is extremely positive is that both sides are sitting together in a very determined fashion. Mr. Talbot, as when we were reporting this editorial this morning, which was put out a little 25 minutes after 8 o'clock this morning, I'm sure Anand has also seen it, and it's making waves here. One of our analyses was, A, it's significant that as a visiting dignitary, he's written an editorial. It's very well timed. You know, the day he lands in New York, he writes a piece pushing Make in India in the Wall Street Journal. And the day he lands in Washington, ahead of the meeting, there is an editorial co-signed by these two distinguished leaders. Now, Mr. Talbot, would an editorial like that be written, signed and penned by Barack Obama and Modi had there not been a commitment? It's like a public commitment to a strong relationship. I mean, you can have conversations, quiet conversations, but when you write an editorial, you talk about working on counterterrorism, space cooperation, intelligence cooperation, and you also make a very significant point that the relationship has to be bigger than the sum of its parts, which seems to indicate that pinpricks in the relationships will not be allowed to stymie it. I'm sure America and Israel also have occasional trouble in their relationship, but they're not allowed to stymie the long-term relationship. Would you agree, Mr. Talbot, that this public commitment of working together is in itself, in terms of putting it out in editorial itself, a very determined step from both the countries, from New Delhi and Washington, to put it out on paper?
I would unequivocally. I've spent quite a bit of my career in diplomacy and quite a bit of my career in journalism, including the diplomatic beat. There may be a precedent for this, that is to say a joint op-ed, as we call it here in the United States, by the two leaders on the same day that they're meeting. I cannot remember such a thing. It suggests everything that you just said, and it suggests something else, which is that a lot of preparation went into this meeting. And I happen to know that because I'm close to Indian officials, particularly in your embassy, obviously here in Washington, and through Brookings India in Delhi. I've stayed very close to what my colleagues there have told me about preparations for this meeting, and I'm certainly close to the U.S. Department of State and the White House as they prepared for it, and they've taken this meeting very, very seriously. And what's interesting is not only have they taken it seriously, but the Indian side and the American side have found significant points of common interest, which can even be articulated in the same words, to allow them to come out with this rather extraordinary joint op-ed in the Washington Post today.
Yeah, and Mr. Talbot, I saw a recent interview of yours which you gave, where you said that you spoke about the importance of a personal rapport between negotiators. I think you were talking about yourself and Jaswant Singh, and you said that the reason you were able to turn a leaf, and you said that as a writer and as a practitioner of policy, that an awful lot of sort of state-to-state relations really depends on personal relations. You know, you spoke about your rapport with Jaswant Singh. How critical is a personal rapport between Modi and Obama? I think it would be very significant, because after all, the whole denial of visa issue to Modi would be somewhere at the back of even Obama's mind, which is why maybe he would put on more of a charm offensive. Do you think it's very, very, very important to break the ice and build a rapport if this is to go anywhere? There's so much on the plate, but it will boil down to personal dynamics, won't it?
Since you were kind enough to mention Jaswant Singh, please allow me, as a point of personal privilege, just to say that every single day I think about my friend Jaswant Singh and the travails he's going through and his family is going through, and I pray for them. With regard to the leaders, I've been a student of history pretty much all my career, and I have found countless examples of how a strong personal relationship between two leaders can make possible things that would otherwise be impossible. And the absence of a strong relationship between leaders makes it very, very hard to make progress on really big issues. And I think the fact that this set of meetings today could be a kind of a bonding experience for the two leaders will give all of us even more reason for optimism about the bilateral relationship going forward.
Well, I think we all share your sentiment vis-a-vis Jaswant Singh, Mr. Talbot, distinguished Indian leader. We all pray for him, for your dear friend. And on a lighter note, Anand and Mr. Talbot, I want to know which restaurant you both went to for breakfast before you joined me on this program. I began by saying I believe you. You agree so much with each other today. I want to know how you set this up this morning. Anand and Strobe, we'll talk later about that. I thank you both very much for adding a very important dimension to our coverage. I've enjoyed talking to both of you. Anand Mahindra and Strobe Talbot for joining me on the run-up to the big meeting. Let's see what happens. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
For him to go out there would be a tremendous risk. I can't see anybody allowing
Yeah, but you know, Seema, this is the whole atmosphere build-up. It's like a carnival. It's like a mela happening outside the White House. I haven't seen anything like this before. I don't think they have either.
Yeah, I think the American Secret Service is puzzled. I think I can safely predict that.
Yeah, without a doubt. They wouldn't
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt.
But remember in New York, when he arrived from the airport, he did go and meet the crowds that were on this street. And then also he was under the protection of Secret Service. So who knows?
You know, he likes to shake hands.
Exactly.
And he likes to send out that message. I think it was recognition.
He's a bit Bill Clintonish in that way.
Bill Clintonish. Maruf, it was very interesting when Navika broke that news report that the focus comes right on the fight against terror. And the situation in West Asia is discussed. And as Navika said, India has put its own experience on dealing with terror right there on the table. So that appears to be a very key touch point of today's conversation.
Well, it's certainly a very important point on Mr. Obama's agenda. So therefore, I wasn't surprised that the Americans would have brought that up. But I think there are 2 or 3 elements to this visit as it has evolved, and we are now at the final stages of it. The one is the whole Indo-US dimension. Now, the Indo-US dimension can only take off to the next level because both sides would be willing to amend some of their earlier held strong positions. For instance, in the case of American companies, to what extent can we transfer technology? Will we transfer technology? For instance, for India, as Mr. Mahindra rightly brought out, that the problem is also in terms of what is it we want. So we have to define that, and we have to then get our systems ready to absorb that technology, and therefore there should be buyers for that if you manufacture something. But I think the most important aspect is how Mr. Modi's personal profile has been put across, and to that extent, I'd like to give credit to the Indian Foreign Office and the Indian diplomats who worked round the clock to make this trip happen in clockwork precision, as you both have brought out, our distinguished guests here, that a lot of very personal issues have been researched and responded to. Mr. Obama's respect for Mahatma Gandhi, Mr. Obama's respect for Indian philosophy, that has been responded to in some ways in terms of gifts.
Right.
Mr. Obama's administration has responded in terms of, what to do with a man who completely is the opposite of Manmohan Singh.
Bill Clinton, as she says.
Yeah, well, I find it difficult to really attribute any complete similarity to Mr. Modi to any previous leader, at least we've had in India. Because, A, his humble background, B, what continues to surprise me, the ease with which he is adapting himself to the world's most demanding global stage performance. He seems to be on the roll.
I think on the ball there, Maruf, you make the point. He's on the roll because he's making an effort to, prepare himself for each little meeting.
Very thoroughly. And his staff has really worked overtime
to make it happen,
whether in India or in the US. And I think kudos to them for having got a lot of things right.
Okay, now I would like to thank Ray, Seema and Maruf at this stage for being with me. We are going to move on to our next panel. But before that, Rahul Bajaj joins me live. Another of India's very distinguished business leaders, a man who doesn't pull his punches, and I hope he doesn't today. He's joining us from Pune. That's good morning to you from Washington. Good evening to you there, Mr. Bajaj. Good to see you here today. Anand Mahindra came in, and for all those who are super
here,
excited,
Arnab.
thinking that there's going to be some big announcements immediately after this bilateral, he poured a little bit of cold water on it and he said, it's going to take some time. Let's not overplay things. What do you think? What are you expecting? Both in terms of perception and in terms of content, which will come out of this meeting at the White House today.
Is that a question to me or not?
Yes, it is to you, Mr. Bajaj. Good evening.
Good evening. I must start by just making a small point that I've been traveling the last couple of days and have not seen you and have not been near a TV for quite some time. So maybe I'm not fully informed of the developments in New York and
welcome back,
Washington the last few hours. Nice to be back. But no, I think, there's quite a hoopaloo and tremendous talk about what's been happening, but we have never had a visit like this of any Prime Minister, I believe, to any country, leave alone the United States. And as I just heard Maruk say, was very, very creditable and surprising in a way is for Mr. Modi to adjust and adapt himself to all kinds of circumstances in India and abroad, from the poor to the rich. Now, what will happen and what's happening at the moment in White House in the discussions between the President and the Prime Minister and their teams, and they did have sort of a breaking ice dinner. I don't know who else ate what, but I believe our Prime Minister was sipping water, or maybe warm water, and requesting others to eat. But I think it's gone very well, not only publicly in Madison Square Gardens and Central Park, and of course the United Nations, the General Assembly speech. I'm only afraid that, like it happened soon after the elections, our aspirations and our hopes should not be built too much. It takes time to achieve results. Even when you take decisions, you can't reduce inflation rate, for example, from whatever it is to 3% to 4% in 6 months' time. You can't increase the GDP growth rate from below 5% to 6, 7% in a year's time. So whether it's reduction of poverty or reduction of inflation, GDP growth rate, or even more aid and technology coming in for defense production, infrastructure, I think that potential is tremendous. And yes, after the great cooperation and friendship between our Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and President Bush, and we signed that historic nuclear peace deal, but for various reasons things cooled down. I think one of them was our requirement, understandable, but which put a lot of liability on the supplier of equipment. Understandable, but no supplier in the US has agreed to those liabilities, and I think it's going to be very difficult for this government, especially with no majority in the Rajya Sabha, to change that, because I don't think Congress will easily agree, the Congress party. But lack of majority in the Rajya Sabha, which will take not 2, maybe 4 years to overcome, seeing the recent last 3 sets of by-elections. And he is outstanding in every respect, it appears, but it appears a one-man show. And barring half a dozen ministers, my friend Arun Jaitley, I'm worried he's not available because of his health. Otherwise, the team appears weak. At least they are inexperienced for no fault of theirs. So there are limitations, and there's so much to do. The last, especially 3 years, I'm sorry to say, I must say, I know, like you, I knew a lot of people, and I still know them. They are friends in the previous government. But the last 3 years were a complete disaster, is the word. And so, even if you or I were the Prime Minister, Arnab, we will do a better job. The question is, it takes time. Let's not build up too much of hopes and aspirations for the Indian people. Already, they are perhaps thinking, exactly, too much of hype. So, I'm sure there are different
we have
views.
another way of putting it, Mr. Bajaj. We have another way of putting it,
Go ahead
you
and
see.
do that.
We don't raise the hype, Mr. Bajaj. We do what you do at Bajaj Industries. We raise the bar. And then we raise the bar so high that you have to take a longest pole and be a pole vaulter to get over it. But in this particular case, Mr. Bajaj, I don't know who the pole vaulter is and who's really building the hype. But it is being generated somewhere. One thing I'll tell you, because I like to powwow with you very often, and you blame me for so many things going wrong, don't blame me for it. Don't blame the media for it. We didn't build the hype. You guys build the hype, the business community build the hype, the politicians build the hype. We're reporting the hype. Mr. Bajaj, don't go away. I can see you smiling there. You don't look good when you're very serious. You look better smiling.
Don't get sensitive, Arnab. You are a friend.
No, you blame the media.
I didn't blame the media at all. I'm just saying it is the politicians, and in fact, it was the speeches of the Prime Minister during the election campaign. And now, whether it's the media or not, I'm not here to put blame. All I'm saying is as I see it. I may be wrong, but maybe I'm right. Let's not, and when I say us, I'm including myself. Well, I'm not different from anyone else. Let's be realistic. And main thing is this.
Sure.
I think that joint statement, the op-ed piece in the Washington Post today, I mean, I do believe that
Washington
I don't
Post,
know, I'm not a historian, but something like this has not been done, at least in the last 10, 20 years, by leaders of any two top countries or big countries.
It's not been done before. You're absolutely right. It has not been done before. It's been done for the first time, and I think that is a great symbolism to that piece as well. Mr. Bajaj, please stay on with us. We have another distinguished panel joining us. To my left is Abraham Denmark. Abraham, hi, thank you for coming in. And he's Vice President of Political and Security Affairs at the National Bureau of Asian Research. Thank you very much, Abraham. And Sadanand Dhume, who's a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Sadanand, good morning. Thank you very much. Good to see you once again. Maruf Raza stays with me as part of this continuing coverage. And the Deputy Director for South Asia of the Stimson Center, Joshua Yutufa. Should we try?
I salute you.
Or we'll do a namaste. We'll do a namaste to each other from here. Okay? Joshua White is Deputy Director for South Asia at the Stimson Center. I want to start with you, Joshua. What are your expectations? Everyone's talking about this visit. It's going to be a bilateral. I think they'll be out in about 40 minutes. What do you think they'll come out and say?
I think they're going to be finalizing some of the last-minute details of the joint statement. I think most of this has been pre-worked already by their respective staffs. But they're going to be talking about the security situation in India, Pakistan, China, and the wider region. There may be some last-minute details related to some of the defense or climate change issues that are being hammered out. But I think most of this has already been really decided, and they're going to mostly do a tour of the horizon, talking about really trying to get a sense of how Modi sees the strategic environment, what he wants to see for India's relations with the great powers and neighbors. Most of all, I think the Obama team wants to get a read of the man and get a sense of where he's going to go in the coming years, more than the actual deliverables that are going to be announced later tonight.
Abraham, how specific does it get in these kind of things? For an Indian audience watching this, we've been talking a lot of specifics, but how specific does it get when it comes to a statement after a meeting like this, please?
Well, normally, the discussions between top leaders stay at fairly general levels. That the specifics of trade agreements, of climate change agreements, of defense sales are often worked through the bureaucracies in the months and weeks before a meeting. Often these agreements, these discussions focus on more of the broad level issues, broad discussions, trying to get a sense for how both sides see the world, see their place in the world, and leave the specifics except for a few issues that may be outstanding that the bureaucracies couldn't work out. Usually those are worked out before the two heads of state meet.
Yeah, so that's, I guess this joint statement, anything different you'd expect, Sadanand? There's been so much hype, it can't be like the kind of joint statement that we've had at the end of each bilateral.
I actually am not expecting there to be sort of very dramatic deliverables, as they say. I think you have to divide this visit into two parts. There's the symbolism and there's the substance. On the symbolism, as we saw in Madison Square Garden, and since then, this visit has been hugely successful.
Yeah.
On the substance, I don't think that either side has had enough time to come up with very dramatic deliverables. But I think that there is a mood change. And if he ends up with three things, he ends up with changing the mood about India, reigniting investor interest, and resetting the government-to-government relationship, I would call this a successful visit.
You call it a success. Okay, before we take the discussion forward, I'm now joined live by Piyush Goyal, who's India's Union Minister for Power and Energy. Mr. Goyal, good morning. You know, most of our panelists here believe it might not get very specific, that this entire trip so far is about resetting of the relationship. Many of them agree that the Washington Post joint editorial itself as a message gives a sense of clarity that the two countries need to go together. We were talking to Strobe Talbot some time back on this program. He also agreed that a public statement of intent, you know, itself is very, very important. Now, Mr. Piyush Goyal, where do we go from here? It's all said, the atmospherics are right. Where do we go from here, and how much can we expect, say, when the two leaders come out 60 minutes from now?
I think both sides have demonstrated a joint commitment to further strengthen this relationship. Mr. Modi has left behind the past and has looked at this relationship with a vigor that only a statesman can have. Mr. Obama has come that extra mile, where within such a short span, where world leaders from across the globe are in the US for the UN Assembly, he has taken out significant time. He has had two extensive engagements at his own level. And I think both sides have very ably and amply demonstrated a shared concern, a shared commitment to further strengthen this relationship. It is obvious that in a span of 120 days, which is what we have completed now as a new government in India, there is only so much that we can do in terms of actual implementation for the Indo-US relations, trade ties, economic, business ties to strengthen and grow. But the message is loud and clear. Our fight against antiquated laws, our effort to streamline the tax processes, our two steps to try and attract investment from all across the world, including America. All of these are being noted, and not only in America, but across the globe. And I think this visit will set the stage for all of us back home and for the administration in the US to start acting on specific initiatives.
Well, one takeaway for me, and I don't know, Mr. Goyal, how you look at it, is that via this visit, and if you look at all the big bilateral meetings Mr. Modi has had, first in Japan, and then he's met the Australian Prime Minister before that, and then he's met Xi Jinping in India, and now he's come to New York and Washington, it's quite clear to anyone that India is beginning to lean towards America in terms of global power play. It's quite evident. And in the Washington Post editorial also, if you see, the entire part about the emphasis on maritime security is very significant. It's totally in line with what Modi said in Japan vis-a-vis China's expansionist attempts in the South China Sea. How do you view this? I mean, India's decision to now strongly lean towards the United States of America.
Arnab, that is your interpretation. I think India's interests lie in keeping our sovereignty, our own national interests as the premier focus of our foreign policy. Mr. Modi has on more than one occasion expressed the view that India's interest lies in looking at foreign policy both from its security perspective and the economic perspective. I think you will appreciate that our effort to streamline our relations and strengthen our relations in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent and our neighborhood, starting from the swearing-in invitation, his own interaction with the Bangladeshi and Nepali premiers in New York a couple of days ago, his visits to the neighboring countries, all of them reflect his desire to emerge as a friend, as a brother to our neighboring countries, to strengthen the entire subcontinent's relationships.
My question was on America, Mr. Goyal. You're not answering my question. My question was about leaning towards America, which will not be lost on many people.
Arnab, why I wanted to strengthen his efforts on the geopolitical environment in the neighborhood was because for us it's not leaning towards one or the other. It's about bringing everybody together. Our Indian ethos of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. So our relations with Japan have a separate pedestal. Our relations with China, with Russia, with Australia, with the European Union. I think we believe in a reciprocal relationship with all countries. America is an eminent country, very large superpower. We respect that, but we also believe that all countries have a role to play in our path towards development and alleviating our own problems and improve the lives of our people back home.
You know, Mr. Goel, you're such a brilliantly consummate politician that I attempted to ask you that question twice, and I quite see that you don't want to preempt anything that happens out of the White House statement. So he deftly, there's one thing I'll tell you, Sadanand, that Indian and American politicians share in common nowadays, is that when they want to avoid the question, they find wonderful, brilliant ways of avoiding it. But I understand why Piyush is doing that today, because like all of us, he's waiting to see what comes out. Mr. Goel, thank you very much for joining me on this live chat. We hope to talk more once this is over. That's Piyush Goel, India's Minister for Power and Energy, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Let's get back to that. Sadanand, are we leaning towards America? Strategically, are we beginning to do that more and more?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that Mr. Goel has to say what he has to say as a government minister.
Yes.
But this stuff about all countries in the world and stuff,
we've
it's
heard that
palpable
before.
nonsense, right? India does not have the same relations with Mali as with the United States. And there is obviously strategic significance to this visit. The fact that...
So why are we apologetic about it? What is there to worry?
I think it's a weird hangover of the old days of the non-aligned movement. That even now politicians are sort of somewhat feel on shaky ground, instead of saying very obviously, India has good relations with many countries. Its relationship with the United States is particularly important. That's as simple as that.
Okay, or maybe we haven't got the commitments back from how do you view it, Josh?
There's obviously been a change. I, just about a year ago, was working at the Pentagon and had a role in Manmohan Singh's last visit here to Washington.
Yes.
And the feeling coming from the Indian government at that time was markedly different.
Yeah.
There was anxiety about appearing to seem to be too close to the United States. There was very difficult negotiations about the joint statement, about some of the rhetorical flourishes as well as the substance.
Yeah.
And there was anxiety about any specification in the joint statement that would time-bound any commitment, to say by the end of the year we'll do X, Y, Z. Now we will still see.
That's why there wasn't much movement, actually. But that's why there wasn't much movement, because all the right things were said when Manmohan Singh was here in Washington last time, but there wasn't really any
time-bounded commitments. And that's one thing we should watch for with this joint statement. I would say, look, are there any time-bounded agreements about what's going to happen? Is there any sense of prioritization aside from a long laundry list of things that we have all agreed? Is there going to be a sense of what our priorities are together? And then you can actually look at the substance. What was agreed and what's on the horizon to be agreed in this document?
You expect time-bound agreements to be there? Time-bound, especially on the issue of terrorism? I mean, on the issue of terrorism, you can't have anything time-bound because you depend on cooperation from Pakistan, everything that India is going to ask for. What can really be time-bound this time? The Trade and Technology Initiative, defense, can there be?
There's a lot of things that can be time-bound in terms of defense cooperation, technology transfers, economics and trade, investment agreements. These specifics are all things that can be time-bound. But to get back to the broader discussion of alignment and which direction India may be leaning, it's fairly easy to talk about a country leaning in one direction or another. To me, what's become very clear in the last few months is that India views its interests as becoming increasingly aligned with American interests. From economic development to countering terrorism, dealing with Chinese assertiveness, securing Afghanistan's future, promoting democracy, addressing climate change. India is going to pursue its own interests, and it's seeing that its interests are very much compatible with American interests, and that's what I think is driving this closer cooperation between our countries.
Yeah, but America, you think that can make America complacent? Because I don't think America can take India for granted at all on that. Because India is also going to watch what America does very, very closely. Like Modi will pressure Obama to implement the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative. I mean, let me tell you one thing. I mean, Modi is good with appearances and handshakes, but he knows he has an audience out there back home, which is going to ask him, did you get the Americans to cut through their bureaucratic red tape? Did you get them to work on the technology transfer? I think his whole focus is going to be on technology transfer rather than arms supply. And he needs to go back and say, I broke the ice. Will he be able to say that? Because if nothing is going to come out of it at the end of this visit, then it's going to be slow progress.
On technology transfer, I think this is going to be a topic of discussion. I think it will appear in the joint statement. There may be something time-bound that says we will identify certain technology transfer projects. But frankly, most of this happens behind the scenes in Washington and in New Delhi. It's an issue of cutting through the bureaucratic undergrowth in both countries. And both leaders should talk about it. They will talk about it. And they should both push each other very hard on it.
Yeah,
and I think they will.
Rahul Bajaj is to go in 5 minutes. I'm told. Mr. Bajaj, what is it that Modi should not do? As you said, he's touched on all the right buttons, even though you've not been watching this very closely, but the sense you get is he's touched on all the right buttons. What do you think Modi should not do with the Americans, especially as far as business is concerned? Which is the area where he should not give in?
Make a couple of points.
Where he should defend our interest in these meetings today.
One, let me just make a comment on this leaning towards the United States. I've heard some comments, including my friend Piyush's comments and some others. The way I look at it, the answer to your question, the way I would answer it, is leaning toward the US or China or Russia. The rest, 187 countries, is very important, but they don't come in the way, whether it's Japan or Mali, as somebody said, they don't come in the way. We can lean towards them or do whatever we want with them. The moment we say lean toward the US, the two countries we have to be careful about are Russia and China. But I won't go into that. Having said that, you know, there's been a strong focus on foreign policy in the last 100 days, and that's good. Now, why do we do that? Even though US in the last few years is not the clear unipolar world of 10 years ago, it's a little bit withdrawing power from the rest of the world, etc., etc. But we need US, we need their capital investment, we need their technology. We have problems with terror, we need their help there. No marriage succeeds unless both partners benefit. So again, yes, US will want something from us, fine. But having said that, our foreign policy, even getting investment, etc., won't succeed, or not as far as I'm concerned, till we improve things back home. Our infrastructure, our labor policy, our Land Acquisition Act. I think the government is doing something with environment, because a lot of things can be done by environment, under environment, without going to the Rajya Sabha and passing any law. Compared to my friends Jayanti Natarajan and Jairam Ramesh, Prakash Javadekar is doing a much more open job, keeping in mind environment is important, but so is development and growth. He is balancing the two. So we have to do so much at home. That doesn't mean don't go to the US. That doesn't mean don't take care now of Myanmar and Australia, or in the past China and Japan, of course. But I think the next year or two, the Prime Minister and his team should focus on improving our things. I don't want to quote them again, infrastructure, labor policy, etc. Then we don't have to go abroad. The investors will bring their money in. I'm a businessman. I go where I feel secure and where I can make a reasonable profit. They will come. You don't have to attract them.
I'm just a little wary. No, I'm just a little wary. I'm just a little wary, Mr. Bajaj. I'm a cynic.
About what?
On some issues. Especially we look at it through a realistic lens. I mean, let's not get all, this tinted eye view of the world. Here we come, America. America loves us. We love America. New relationship. Let's go gaga. Let's not do that, because we cannot make that commitment to America till America makes equal commitments to us. And I'm afraid, Sadanand, while, you said out there that it's great, I was testing you out there, where you said, let us be open about the fact that we lean toward America for what? Will America lean towards us vis-a-vis Pakistan? Has America done anything on the issue of terrorism? Have they ever linked aid, military assistance to Pakistan, to building their relationship with India? Have they said one word on the Haqqani brothers? And even after the attack on the Indian consulate in Herat, not one word from them. Has America done anything as far as the Lashkar-e-Toiba is concerned, which survives essentially on misdirected American aid? Not one word. Have they transferred significant defense technology to us? Certainly not. They want everything back in turn, but especially as far as the security situation is concerned, they haven't given back very much. The only answer is, we have compulsions. And in fact, they seek our cooperation on ISIS. And I think Modi has actually reached out a lot by saying that, virtually supported the action against ISIS. What have we got in turn? So are we giving in too much too early in the rush of a relationship that is rebuilding all over again?
Arnab, I think it's fair. You can argue fairly that the US has not done enough to satisfy India's concerns on terrorism. I think it's completely inaccurate to argue that the US has done nothing. Hafiz Saeed is has a bounty on his head.
Come on, I mean that's
LET
absolutely
has
nothing.
been declared.
Hafiz Saeed is a free man. Hafiz Saeed is a free man in Pakistan. Pakistan lives on American aid. The American ambassador comes and says, the Pakistani ambassador says he's a free man. Putting a $10 million bounty on his head and then watching your closest ally continue to fund him through money that has been routed through is not good enough.
No, you can do that. That's a fair.
It's not good enough.
That's a fair argument, but you can't argue that there's been nothing.
Of course there's been nothing. When you have an engagement that ends with Osama bin Laden and up to 2012, you continue to say that we are committed to Afghanistan, we are committed to fight.
Okay,
and
so
now you sort of move away from that.
Let me
you
ask
don't
you
even
a
mention the Al-Qaeda because you're beginning to move out.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that the US presence in Afghanistan has helped the security situation in India or not in terms of terrorism? Post-2001?
No, Narendra Modi did that. Let Maruf respond to you. Maruf.
Let me tell you a few things. The US went into Afghanistan firstly on the good advice of a lot of people saying it went into the wrong country. Today there are authors who've actually authored books to say the wrong enemy, Kalota Gol. Basically because the US has a lot of people here who believe that you cannot touch Pakistan because Pakistan has nuclear weapons, so you have to behave more responsibly with Pakistan. But there are other non-military means you can exercise to put the pressure on a country like Pakistan. Economic isolation, a certain amount of diplomatic isolation.
Precisely.
But anyway, that wasn't done. But I think there's a more important...
By the way, Maruf, can I just interrupt you? I've got one bit of breaking news. I'm going to come back straight to you out there.